We have lots to cover today. Thank you everybody for joining us. Some of the things that we'll talk about today are things that you've gotten a little bit of a taste of. Some of the things are absolutely new. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with something that I haven't talked about before, which is the story of how V3 and DDN came to be. So with that, let me just share my screen. So in the fall of 2022, which is late in 2022, on what I describe as a foggy San Francisco autumn afternoon. Unfortunately, a bunch of us were gathered together in a room with folks and our team dialed in from all over the world. And what we were starting to really think about was this kind of pattern that we were starting to see with our users and customers, which was something that we hadn't expected. And what we were seeing was successful users and customers starting to use Hasura more like a platform than a tool. And we start kind of looking at the various asks on the roadmap that users had and start kind of putting that together in the context of a platform. One of the biggest asks has been, for example, metadata modularization. Can I take bits of my Hasura metadata and think of them as reusable chunks? Can I have an auth module that I import straight into Hasura instead of having to build it myself or use something else? Can I integrate custom code and not have to call out to a different piece because I already have something that exists? I already have a service that exists. I already have an API that exists. It's not just a database. I have deployments that I want to run in multiple regions or across multiple clouds or hybrid scenarios where, a part of the data that's coming in is on-prem and I'd love for my GraphQL layer to be on the cloud. Sometimes it's embedded. All kinds of uh, complicated topologies. Our users start asking us for standardizing composability. Originally, when we introduced actions and remote schemas inside Hasura, they were meant to help kind of bridge the gap for the primary use case. But over time, we started seeing users ask for saying, hey, all of the superpowers that we get on data, can we get that on remote schemas as well? Because I'm starting to bring in more services into Hasura. I want to do action-to-action joins. We still don't have action-to-action joins on V2, right? But that's been kind of one of those big asks because it makes a lot of sense when you start thinking about the fact that you have so many API endpoints that exist that are already there that you want to start joining again, right? You want permissions and fine-grained permissions on these existing APIs like actions and remote schemas and stuff like that. And so as we kind of thought about those requirements, we realized that we had been thinking about Hasura as a tool and a technology that a team would use, a full stack developer would use to say, I am the owner of my database, I'm the owner of my data, I'm the owner of my domain, and I'm going to build an API on top of that. But what started happening was that this person who was owning that Hasura instance and the API, they start kind of bringing in more things into it. The owner wanted to say, let me delegate this to different people and not just be bottlenecked on me. Let me provide more features to my API consumer that work in the same way, regardless of where it came from and what producer built it, right? And so what we did was we took a step back and we said, what does the platform story, if we think of Hasura as a platform, what does that look like, right? As opposed to an amazing Swiss Army knife tool that you would use as a person building an API. What if it was a platform where multiple people could build the API together and multiple people could consume the API together, and they had different things that they cared about? And so we start kind of thinking about it as this approach where we think about one part of what Hasura does is the system inside Hasura that helps people connect their data or their code or their APIs into the platform, right? So Hasura kind of exists as a platform in isolation, and you connect things to it. You have consumers who come into the platform and consume APIs, and they have an amazing API that lets them do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want to. Kind of exactly what Hasura V1 and V2 did, but in a way that felt more self-serve and less coupled with the team. If this was a platform, a kind of two-sided marketplace, the platform would need to have capabilities to help people collaborate and um, improve that platform and whatever data is serviced inside the platform. And we kind of started thinking about looking at our roadmap and looking at the way that we were thinking about Hasura V3 and DDN and the building blocks that we were putting together as almost opening Hasura up a little bit and opening up what we had done in V2 and making that more available, more customizable to all of the different folks who were involved in setting up a Hasura platform at any scale, whether it was whether you were thinking of it as a platform that you were building for yourself as an indie developer or a team or a large organization that had multiple teams. And that kind of started guiding our thought process on what the appropriate reference architecture would be. One of the things that I think backs the any successful platform is that insight that humans are social creatures that hate talking to each other. So the more the platform allows people to work in a self-serve way, and the less that we have to talk to each other, the better things get. Kind of sad and maybe doesn't bode well for humanity as a whole. But every great platform has that property of just not needing to talk to people and still feeling the power of a lot of people working together kind of come through. That reference architecture that was really simple with V2 kind of had to unpack and scale out a little bit, right? To say, what if it wasn't just data that was coming into Hasura, but it was data from multiple places? It was data and code. It was data and code and APIs. And it didn't matter what these things were. We still kind of generated the same API, the same superpowers that anybody could use, and maybe different teams could use when they had different needs and different kind of features that they wanted, different kinds of permissions and access control rules that they wanted, different kinds of onboarding experiences that they wanted. And that kind of became the shift towards making sure that if one wanted to go from a small scale platform that you see on the left to a large scale platform on the right, that journey, could we start that process of making it seamless? Putting kind of these pieces together is when we decided to call this the Hasura Data Delivery Network. And we started work about a year ago in building out some of those core portions and kind of validating some of the key architectural ideas that would form the foundation of V3. And then DDN, which is kind of the hosted planet scale platform version of Hasura, right? And that kind of started last year, brings us to today, where we're happy to roll this out in beta. It doesn't have all of the features for V2 yet, which I'll talk about in a second, subscriptions and event triggers and stuff like that. But they're all coming, they're in the pipe. And this kind of allows us to start using Hasura in a slightly different way, in a slightly more scaled out way, and also in a way that allows us to just bring more into Hasura, to customize it, make it more flexible, and to connect to more of the things and the ways that we already work without having to change the way that we work for all of the different people who are involved here. So with this, I'm going to see two ideas, and then we're going to get into demos, looking at different bits of all of those people in that flywheel, right? We're going to look at API consumption. We're going to look at how to understand and discover what we have in our API. We're going to look at how we can connect all kinds of different things into Hasura. But as we look at this, for those of you who are thinking about GraphQL itself as a platform, I'd like you to walk away with kind of two key ideas, right? The first is the way that we built DDN, and in the demos that you will see, we want it to be the most seamless way to onboard an existing domain and for you to get a standardized GraphQL API. We want to be able to go from you have something and you want to get a standardized GraphQL API to be that we want that journey to be the fastest possible, not just when you start, but also when you iterate on that domain. Let's say you have a database or code or gRPC or GraphQL servers or OpenAPI servers, right? Whatever you have, whatever that domain is, you're going to be changing that domain. You're going to be managing that domain. What is the fastest possible way for you to kind of take that domain and get an API from that domain, right? And as you're thinking about this as a platform, it becomes really important because one of the biggest roadblocks to rolling out GraphQL as a platform is that lots of different people who own domains don't really want to build and maintain yet another thing, right? Because building and maintaining yet another API layer is just more work, and all of us could do with doing a little less work. The second piece is federated ownership of domains, which is that can each of the teams have their own microservice like CI/CD, right? Can they test and deploy independently? But get that feeling that it all feels like a monolith that's come together. We are collaborating as if it was one code base, collaborating on this unified API as if it was one thing. We're getting build-time feedback. We're not having to roll out a microservice and then watch it break multiple things and then kind of come back and fix it, right? Can we get that monolithic like stability or property or collaboration or validation, but a microservice like independence and experience in doing things? And that's kind of one key idea for thinking about GraphQL as a platform is how Hasura can help and how DDN can help support that journey as you think about scaling your GraphQL adoption across multiple teams. If you're already using Hasura V2, I'd like you to walk away with two key ideas. The first is, if you're thinking about scaling Hasura V2 itself into a platform, you're thinking about decomposing the database that Hasura sits on into multiple databases, or maybe you just want to start bringing in multiple sources inside. Maybe it's data, maybe it's code, maybe it's APIs. And if you're thinking about making that experience better because you want that to be a platform for your team or your organization as opposed to you owning those multiple sources yourself. And the second part of this is, what do you think about V3 and DDN for two particular use cases that have been a thorn in your side for a long time? The first is you want to get Hasura superpowers not just on your data, but also your code. We're starting this off with TypeScript, but whatever we're showing you would work with any programming language whatsoever. All we need to do is introspect that just the way that we introspect a data source or introspect an API. And the second is that you want our new pricing, which I will also talk about and has been a phenomenal amount of work over the last year and a half.